Hello and welcome to the Becoming the Street Fighter video series. This is episode 1. It's going to go over the absolute basics. But before we get to that, just to get a few... There's generally a lot of questions I get when people ask me to teach them about Street Fighter. One of the first ones I often get is, do I have to play on stick? And I would say, honestly, no. Just play whatever you're comfortable with. Pad is actually perfectly fine. And for Street Fighter 5 in particular, what we're playing on now, on a what's called execution level, like your physical ability to press buttons, the game isn't too hard, and so pad will be fine. Don't even worry about that. Play whatever you're comfortable with. And it's Street Fighter 5 is a new game. It's a new start for everybody, so just play with whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to get a stick later, worry about that later. For now, we just want to learn the fundamentals. And this guide is mostly for people who are very new to Street Fighter 5. If you've either, or just fighting games in general, if you've never even really gotten into a fighting game before, but Street Fighter 5 is this new game and you want to try it out, or you've tried to get into fighting games before, but you can never quite, make any progress. So now that we got that out of the way, the first thing we're going to do is go to our training mode. So as we get started, the first thing I recommend is starting with Ryu. Now there's a few reasons for that. You might already be thinking, like, I don't want to play Ryu, I want to play this character, I think they're fun. I'm not saying you have to play Ryu forever. I'm not saying you even have to play Ryu for the next 3 months, just for the sake of learning the fundamentals. If you want to play another character, you can transition once you learn the basics. And the reason why it's good to start with Ryu is because he's a character who is based on fundamentals. He's a well-rounded character. He has pretty much, if you want to play Ryu effectively, you can't really rely on a lot of gimmicks or tricks. You kind of have to know the basics of fighting games to a large degree. So this is a good way to kind of lead you in the right direction as when it comes to learning the game in all ways. So we're going to pick Ryu. And for this training exercise, we'll go against Ken. Doesn't really matter too much. So the first thing I want to emphasize before we do anything is that it's really easy to get overwhelmed when you're playing a fighting game for the first time, because there's all these different moves and mechanics. For the sake of this beginning video, what we want to do is, we want to narrow down what we're actually going to do as little as possible. Because the less you actually have to internalize, the easier it's going to be to execute. We want to simplify the game as much as we can. So the very first thing, before we do anything, let's look at the user interface. On the top of the screen, those green bars are a health bar. Pretty self-explanatory. When you get hit, it goes down. When it empties, you're dead. Now, you see that smaller bar under Ken's life bar? That is his stun gauge. When that fills up, he gets stunned, as it says right there. And he can't do anything. When you are stunned, you can mash pretty much every button to get out of stun faster. When your stun gauge is pretty high, as long as you don't get hit or forced to block, as you can see, the stun gauge will go down. It's a relatively simple concept. You don't really even have to worry about it too much now. You'll kind of see how it works as you play. It's not something you need to focus too much on. Like, as you're playing people, when you get to that point, you'll visually see it as you play, and you'll understand it pretty quickly. It's a pretty intuitive idea how it works. So now on the bottom of the screen, you see that blue bar. That's what I call super gauge. It's in this game, I think it's called critical art or whatever. It's a super meter. That's how it's always been in fighting games, but whatever. And there's also a red bar called V trigger. For right now, we are not even going to worry about either of those bars. Like, seriously, we don't even care right now about those. So don't even worry about it. And you could probably also see that infinity symbol in between the health bars. Normally that's a timer, but because we're in training mode, it's basically deactivated. In an actual match, that timer will start at a certain time and tick down. If it hits 0, whoever has the most amount of health will win. So that can be an important part of certain matchups. If the match is dragging on, and let's say if you have more health than your opponent, you might want to play defensive and kind of lame them out. Perfectly valid strategy. But again, we don't even really need to worry about that too much right now. For now, just health bar, stun gauge. We don't care about anything else really. So the very first thing we're going to do is go to our command list, because we need to learn how to effectively use training mode. So this is what you see when you first hit start, and we're going to go to command list, you see right here. Also, one brief note, you can set the buttons pretty much however you want. It's up to you. Just find what you're comfortable with. This is what I have set up. It really depends on if you're using a stick or a pad. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you think works for you, and be wow, I can't talk. Feel free to change it as you're learning the game because maybe you have it set up a way and a certain move's hard for you to do because it's set up. Like, it's better to get it down the way you want it before you get accustomed to anything. So fiddle with that as you need to while you're learning these basic things. So we're going to go to command list right here. And these are Ryu's special moves, as it says on the screen there. So he has a bunch of different moves, as you can see. Well, actually, there's only 4 here, but for right now, we're honestly only going to focus on the Hadouken, the top one here. And the motion there, you see, is quarter circle forward punch. Now, you might be thinking, okay, how do I do that? Very simple. So before we even get to that, though, we're going to turn on the key display here. So turn this on and go back. Now you can see on the left side of the screen, you see all these inputs coming up. That's everything I'm pressing right now. The reason why we want that on is because we're going to try to do a fireball right now. And this will help us see exactly what our inputs are. So if we're having trouble, you can literally look at the left side of the screen and see what you're doing. So quarter circle forward fireball is very simple. It's down, down, forward, forward, punch. See the inputs I did right there after that light punch? Basically the top 4 inputs, down, down, forward, forward. I did 2 forwards, but again, well actually, technically I did, technically I didn't, because down, forward will always be those 2 inputs. That's how you want it. And right now I'm doing light punch, but you can use any punch button. As you can see, the different punches put the fireballs at different speed. So something basic like this, even though it's very simple, can be hard if you've never done it before. So, practice this until you can do it pretty consistently. Don't be afraid to do this for a while. You want to be able to do this pretty much on command. So there's also a very simple yet very important detail of how fireballs work that a lot of people, I think, overlook because it's such a traditional and old school thing, is that you can't have 2 fireballs on screen at the same time. Like if I do a slow fireball, see, I was trying to throw a fireball immediately after, it's not going to come out because there's already a fireball on the screen. Like if I try to throw a fierce one, I'll just get that. It's not going to come out. And a lot of new players don't know that, and they're confused. Like, why am I messing up my fireball so much? You're not actually messing it up. You just can't have 2 fireballs on the screen at the same time. So the trick is to time your next fireball as soon as the first one goes away. So in this example, as soon as it hits Ken. It can also be as soon as the fireball leaves the screen. And that type of timing is something you got to practice, It's not too tricky, but it's something you definitely want to keep in mind. So practice that until you can do it consistently. So the next thing we want to do is, so let's say, I'm practicing combos on Ken, as you can see here, just doing whatever. So his stun gauge is going to fill, and that's actually going to get kind of annoying, because while we're practicing in training mode, we don't want to stun the dummy over and over again. So we're going to go back to basic settings. We're going to hit R1, go down to stun, and turn that off, no stun. So that way, the stun gauge will still fill, so you can still see how much you're doing, but it will not actually stun, as you can see. See, not actually stunning. So that way you can test your stuff as much as you want. And if you want a more exact amount of information on like how much you're doing stun, go to attack data and turn that on. Now you can see how much damage your attacks are doing, how much stun they do, whether or not it was a combo, damage scaling, the type of attack, all very important things you want to be able to see. So turn that on as well. So the next thing we want to do is we want to focus on what moves we're going to use as Ryu. So we're going to be using this, standing medium punch. I know it might seem really simple, but this is actually a really good button. And we're going to be using it for many different things. So for this first thing we're going to do is, like look at that, 2 hits. It combos into itself. Now this is a timing you're going to need to learn. It's actually very simple. You just tap the medium punch and then tap it at a specific time afterward. If you hit it too late, actually I still got it. If you hit it too late, that will happen. It didn't say 2 hits. It did not combo. If you hit it too soon, the second punch won't come out. So you want to get this timing right here. 2 hits. Not too hard. So the next thing we want to do is we want to learn what's called special canceling. And this is going to involve a fireball that we've already learned. So after a medium punch, you can special cancel into a fireball. This is different from what we were doing before. What we were doing before this, that's what's called a link. You're basically just doing the next move as soon as the first move's ended. But with this, we're actually canceling the first move by doing a fireball. That used to be called a 2-in-1, because you're literally doing 2 moves in one action, essentially. So, how is this done? You basically finish the fireball input when the medium punch connects. And the easiest way to do this is to input the directionals for the fireball before the medium punch hits, and then the fierce punch, in this example for the fireball, when the medium punch connects. The reason that is it will give you more time to do the fireball motion. You don't have to speed through it. You can kind of get it in a nice flow. Practice this until you can do it consistently. It's not too hard. Street Fighter V has a 3-frame buffer, basically meaning your combos have a little bit of leniency. That usually applies to links like this. Like this would actually be harder to do in Street Fighter 4, for example. It's not something you're really probably going to notice, but it's just nice to keep that in mind. And I'll get into what frames are later. Don't worry about it right now. It's not a big deal. So the 2 steps we've learned, this and this, we want to combine them into this. See, 3 hits. That's a combo. Basically, what combo is, if you don't know, most people do, but it's, I want to be thorough. Once the first hit of a combo connects, the opponent can't do anything until it's over. He can't block, he can't move, he can't do anything while those hits are still being tallied. Like you can see on the top right corner of the screen in our data, combo 3. So that's a chain that cannot be escaped. Can't block it, can't do anything. So basically, this is a good way to get damage. Because once that first hit connects, as long as you do the combo correctly, your opponent can't do anything about it. So practice this combo until you can do it fairly consistently. It's not a very crazy combo, not very complex. Excuse me. But it's a very good combo to start with. Simple, but it's versatile because you can also combo into other things. Like this medium punch has a lot of versatility. It can combo into a lot of things. Like right there. Oh, it also links into crouching fierce. Oh, screw it up. Got it. See? So this medium punch right here, that's why I want you to start by focusing on this button. Because it does a lot of different tasks. It's a good button to kind of start out experimenting with. And as you get more comfortable doing things like this, doing this, doing all these different things, then eventually you can start, transitioning into different things. But this is what I want you to start with. It's simple but effective. It gets the job done. So the next thing we want to do is we want to learn how and when to utilize this. Like, when am I going to be hitting this button? Right? Because I can't just if I'm here, I can't just walk up and hit him, right? And that's another thing. If you hit forward medium punch, you're going to get this. Just a thing to keep in mind. Which is an overhead, and we'll get into that later. For now, don't worry about it. So the next thing we're going to do is, this is where it really gets into the meat of how to use training mode. Because training mode has a lot of options, but it might not be very apparent at first. So we're going to hit R1, and we are going to go to Record Wake Up Actions. And then we are going to go to Recording Slot 1 Empty. I'm going to hold down back and mash jab. Reverse. See how it said reversal there? That means I did it right. Basically, what I just did is I recorded a wake up action for Ken where it's the very first frame he gets up, he will do a crouch jab. Now, I've said frame a few times, so I'm going to explain what that is now. Basically, a frame is one single instant of the game state. Street Fighter V runs at 60 frames per second, so every frame is 1/60th of a second. So the very first 1/60th of a second that Ken gets up, he will input that crouching jab. And it's important that I said input, not do, because it still takes a certain amount of frames for the jab to actually activate and be performed. So in this example, his attack will come out at around 3 frames or so after he gets up. Don't worry about the exact frame data too much. It's not that important right now to know. Just have that in your mind, like how these, like the general principle, but you don't really need to know the exact numbers yet. So next thing we're going to go to is set wake up actions. We're going to go to recording slot 1 and turn that on. So now, if we knock down Ken, he's going to do a crouch jab. So if I go near him, he's going to hit me. So now we're going to learn something called Meaties, which is very important. Watch what I do here, assuming I do it right, and I did. If you look closely on the left side of the screen, you saw a counter. What that means is I'm doing what's called a counter hit. Some people also might call this a frame trap, although I prefer to just call this a counter hit, but it's, you know, whatever. What's happening here is he's inputting a jab, but my medium punch is hitting him first. Now, according to the frame data, a jab will beat a medium punch because it comes out quicker. But because he's knocked down, I can input my medium punch as he's getting up. So my medium punch is overlapping Ken before he even has a chance to do his crouch jab. That's why getting a knockdown is advantageous, because it limits your opponent's options. This is what's called an Oki situation. Oki refers to advantage on a knockdown opponent. I keep timing it wrong. And this is another thing you should practice. Practice this timing of hitting this button so you do not get hit by that jab and you don't do it too late or too early. Like right there, I did it too late. The reason why this is important because you will play people who will hit buttons on their wake up like that, and you want to be able to punish them for it, to take advantage of this knockdown state. And you see that you can combo right out of that once you see it hits. So get in the habit of doing this. You'd be surprised how often just doing this will work. Someone will get knocked down. You'll just do this medium punch and it'll hit, and you'll be like, why is he getting hit by that? It works, trust me. You'll be surprised. It might not work on a great player, but for now, this is good for our purposes. We'll learn more advanced stuff as we go. So learn to do this meaty timing. Learn to combo out of it seamlessly. And take this all step by step. Like if you're still having trouble doing a fireball, that's fine. Keep practicing that, you know, until you get it down consistently. Then move on to this. Then move on to this. And then move on to this. You don't have to do it, you know, as fast as I'm doing it, obviously. Take your time with it, you know. So now we're going to record another wake up action. This one's a little trickier. So actually before I do that, I'm going to do a dragon punch. So what I just did there is forward, down, forward, forward, punch. So the key to this is, to get that input the way I just did it is, you never want to hit down by itself, because that will happen. If you hit down by itself when going to down forward, you're very likely to get a fireball. So you want to make sure you never go too far down on your stick or on your pad letting go of forward. You want to basically stay, you never want to go past the down forward motion. You can see my inputs now on the from the other side of the screen, now on the left side. This is a little trickier to do than a fireball, so if you're having trouble, take your time. And different punch buttons, do stronger Choryukens. For the sake of the test we're about to do, we're going to use medium Dragon Punch. Because medium Dragon Punch has pretty good invincibility. And pretty self-explanatory. When you're doing an invincible move, for the amount of time it's invincible, you can't be hit. So for example, if Ken were to do a move, my Dragon Punch would almost surely beat it, because I have invincible frames. Again, frames is basically a way of saying time, how long. That's basically the layman's term of frames. Like, what is the easy way to translate frames? It's a length of time. One frame being an extremely short amount of time, 60 frames being a second. So, the reason why I want you to learn a Dragon Punch is because we're going to record another Wake Up action. What we want is the Ken to do a Wake Up medium Dragon Punch. The timing can be tricky, like I just made it look easy there. If you have trouble doing that, just keep trying. Do that Dragon Punch motion with medium punch, and try to get it to say reversal like you saw on the screen. Take as much time as you need doing it. It can be tricky to do, you know, no rush. And once you get that, we're going to go to Set Wake Up Actions, turn off slot 1, turn on slot 2. Now the reason this is important, because if we try our Meaty timing like before, oh crap, that doesn't work anymore. Because even though we have frame advantage, which I'll explain in a moment, his move is invincible. Dragon Punch is invincible. At least that version of it. So it doesn't matter that my attack is coming out first, because I literally can't hit him while he's doing that move. Now frame advantage, basically, again, it's a way to say time advantage. When I have frame advantage, I'm ahead of him, basically, if you want to think about it in terms of a timeline. Since he's knocked down, I can act first. But in this example, it doesn't matter that I act first, because his move will always beat my move. So you might be thinking, okay, well, what do I do about this? How do I, take advantage of this? Block. You block, and then you punish him. So there's another thing you should practice. Block, punish. So this is probably a good time to talk about blocking. So blocking is actually a thing in Street Fighter that's quite hard to do. It seems simple, but it's actually not. There's a lot more to it that first glance, and there's a lot of misconceptions I think new players have about blocking. So for starters, to block normally you hold back and down back to block low. So we're going to have Ken, we're going to go back to dummy settings, guard all. So like if you see, he's going to hit back as soon as I hit him. And if I do a low attack, he's going to down back to block that low. Now here's the interesting thing. A lot of new players probably wouldn't realize this, but down back like this, that's really the default blocking. That probably doesn't seem intuitive because you might assume that down back is like a more niche form of block that you might not do that often, but it's actually the default, and I'll explain why. So there are attacks that have to be blocked high, but they're typically more rare. For example, all jumping attacks do have to be blocked high. If you look at the attack data on the top right side of the screen, it says attack level mid. That means it has to be blocked high when it says that. Like, see? Mid. But if I do this, it says high. I know it sounds kind of strange, that's the terminology the game uses, but high attacks can be blocked anyway. They can be blocked low or standing. But a mid has to be blocked standing. While a low attack, as you see here, has to be blocked crouch. So the reason why this is important is because jumping attacks that have to be blocked high, you can react to them pretty easily. You can see your opponent jump, see him come down. You have quite a bit of time to stand up and block back. So if you're crouched like this and see someone jump and you don't want to do an attack, you have plenty of time to just hold back and block. You don't really have to react all that quickly. And also, on the ground, there are not that many attacks that actually hit overhead. Attacks that have to be blocked high are typically called overheads. Like, for example, we saw the move earlier, this attack. This is what a lot of players call an overhead. The game calls it a mid. It has to be blocked high. This was one of the only ways that Ryu can hit and force you to block high on the ground. If I do this, it will say attack level mid. So you have to block that high. So know what you're thinking. Well, okay, you've explained all these things that have to be blocked high. Why is low blocking the default? Because there's actually quite a few attacks that have to be blocked low from Ryu. And this move right here, this crouching medium kick, you can combo out of it. So it's a low attack, but it's pretty dangerous. So you typically want to make sure you don't get hit by that. And it's very quick. Like, it's hard to react to that. Like, if Ryu's right here, and you're not sure what he's going to do, and he just does that, it's going to be hard. You might not really be able to react to that. So you're going to block low by default. Where this overhead, it's kind of slow. And he can't combo off it anyway. So even if it hits you, it's not nearly as bad as what that could be. He has a lot of options out of this crouch medium kick. So that's why typically you want to down back. As you play the game more, you'll learn what characters' overheads do what characters have scary overheads, and as you get more experience, you'll learn when to go from down back to back as you react to someone doing an overhead. So if you're not sure what to expect, a general rule of thumb is to block down back. So we were learning how to punish dragon punches. Oh, I should probably turn Ken back to no guard. So you can block it, just like any normal move, and punish, right? But this is where something called a mind game comes into play, or Yomi, as a lot of people like to call it. Yomi is just a fancy word. It's basically the Japanese word for reading the mind of the opponent. fancy word, but it's a relatively simple concept. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to set wake up options, and we're going to turn 1 on and leave 2 on. The reason why is because now Ken will alternate between crouch jabs and medium dragon punches. Hopefully he'll oblige me. There we go. So now I don't know what he's going to do. If he does the dragon punch, I want to block. If he does the crouch jab, I want to do my medium punch. This is a guessing game, or Yomi. Like right there, I guessed right. I guessed right again. I want him to do something that I'm going to guess wrong on. See, I guessed wrong, I got hit. So this is where things get a little trickier. You have to try to predict. You try to have to read what your opponent is going to do. Now there are ways to try and counter both options, but it can be hard. Like say if I sweep him, try that again, and I did it wrong. Like right there, I just hit him out of his crouch jab. And right there, I was able to block his dragon punch. What I just did there is called a safe jump. I'm not going to have you learn that right now. We'll talk about stuff like that in a later video, but the point is, I just want you to be aware that there are ways to cover multiple options with a single thing, which is going to improve your chances of basically punishing your opponent's actions. So sometimes it might seem hopeless, like I can't, I don't know what this guy's going to do, I can't really get a read on him, but there are ways as you learn more about the game and as you get better. So the next thing we're going to talk about, we talked about blocking. I'm going to turn off the wake up actions for now. Set wake up actions, turn those off. So another way to beat blocking without overheads, or mids as the game calls them, is throws. You get medium, jab in short, or light punch and light kick at the same time. And you'll see where you do this, and you throw it when you're close. Throws cannot be blocked, so that's another way to punish someone for down backing or just being inactive in general. Also, if you hit back in throw, you'll do a back throw. That can give you a positional advantage depending on the situation. So an important thing here is throws lead to a knockdown, which can be good because it can give you that Oki situation we talked about before. And now we're going to go to record wake up actions. Slot 3, we're going to do a wake up throw for Ken. And I did it too early because we want it to be basically as soon as he gets up. I don't think that was quite the right time. I think it will say reversal. Actually, I'm just going to mash. Yeah, don't be afraid to mash in these situations. We're just trying to test things. It doesn't have to be perfect timing. And I don't think I got it again. Or maybe, actually, I could be wrong. Okay, I got it that time. Cool. So just keep doing that until you get it. So now set wake up actions to slot 3. So now if I knock down Ken, he's going to do a throw. So now if I go to throw him, there's a thing called throw escape. And this is typically how you defend against throws. You input your own throw. This is typically called a throw tech. But, like we learned before, if I do a medium punch, I will counter his throw tech. So this is a very basic way to try to punish someone. Try to get them to whiff a throw by towering over them. Because a lot of times, if you're on top of someone like this, they might assume you're going to throw. Because you're so close. Because look, throws have very short range. So you have to be that close. So you can easily also move out of the way of the throw attempt. Very easily. And then punish your opponent. And another misconception I believe a lot of new players have is a lot of new players assume, I believe, that throw teching, like we're seeing Ken do here, is like just having really good reactions. Where often it's not. A lot of times players are predicting the throw. Because again, if you're knocked down like that, and someone's really close to you like that, there's a good chance they'll throw. So you might put in your throw escape, your throw input, well before you might be ready to do it well before it actually happens. Because you're predicting your opponent's gonna do it. So now we've learned about blocking. We have a basic combo that I want you to utilize. We've learned about how to capitalize on a knockdown with simple things like this. We've learned about how to bait by blocking a Dragon Punch after a knockdown. We've learned how to do fireballs. So now there's a very important topic we need to discuss. So I'm going to take off Wake Up Action for now. And that's called, it's basically about controlling space. This is the most important part of a fighting game. And it's something we're going to be talking about through each video. So I can't, right now I'm only going to give a very basic insight to it. Pretty much anything you do is an element of controlling space. We're in a 2D plane, and all your attacks cover a certain amount of ground, a certain amount of space. The fireball is like the typical example of controlling space because it basically covers the entire horizontal space of the screen. But pretty much anything can be controlling space. Like the sweep, I'm covering that spot in the ground, and Ken has to do something about it if I'm there. Now some people might be thinking, oh, is that footsies? No, this is not footsies. We'll talk about that later. Footsies is like footsies is basically an element of controlling space, but it's more complicated than this. We'll get to that later. So, about fireballs. This is like what you're going to be doing typically at this range, like right here. Basically anytime you're not like in this area. Like in this area, you can use fireballs. But for now, we're not going to do that. For now, we're going to typically throw fireballs in this range. Now, again, another misconception a lot of people have is that you throw fireballs to hit your opponent with fireballs. And that's actually not really why you throw a fireball. You throw a fireball because you want to get your opponent to jump. Because a jump attack in this game, or any Street Fighter game, a jump in like this is a high-risk, high-reward move. It's high reward because a jumping fierce or roundhouse like these typically do good damage, and they can combo into pretty much anything. But they're high risk because when you're in the air like this, you can't block, and you're committed to this action. So if you have a way to counter the jump, you can pretty much guarantee it. And that's where reused Dragon Punch comes in. While the fireball covers horizontal space like this, if I could do it, the Dragon Punch covers vertical space. So by using both of these techniques, you can cover both options, staying on the ground or in the air. So what we're going to do is, we're going to hit R1 when we go back to our dummy settings. Actually, where is it? As I lose it. Let's see. We're going to go to status. Ah, here it is. Dummy settings. We're going to go to playback recordings. Action recording settings. We're going to use slot 1. So we're going to have Ken do a jumping medium kick. After you do the jumping medium kick, hit start to save it. Go to action playback and turn that on. Now Ken is going to constantly do jumping medium kicks. If you're comfortable doing Dragon Punches, you can practice this right now. Very simple. If you're having trouble, you can actually just use the same button we've been doing. This medium punch is if I could do it, this medium punch is quite versatile. As you can see, it's actually not a bad anti-air. It's not as good as Dragon Punch, but it's actually not that bad. It's even beating his jumping medium kick clean a lot of times. So you can see this medium punch is a pretty good button. Again, not as good as a Dragon Punch, but if you're having trouble doing this, don't be ashamed to do it. You're new to the game. And you can see, depending on my position, the medium punch will be either more or less effective. That's an element called spacing. How you space yourself can determine if your moves will beat your opponents. As you can see, the medium punch kind of outranges the jumping medium kick. Like, see right there? But if I'm closer, he can hit me. So you can kind of learn, by spacing yourself in different ways in training mode, you can kind of learn how different moves interact with each other. So if you're far away, the medium punch is pretty good. And this is important because if you're far away, the Dragon Punch could miss. The Dragon Punch is more vertical. Like, see? It missed. If I did the medium punch, it hits. Closer, Dragon Punch is probably better. Again, you can practice both of your anti-air options like this if you want. Now, the important thing to note is here, if you hit someone with a fireball, oftentimes they're going to jump after. So after you throw a fireball, don't just throw another one. Wait a second. Throw a fireball? Well, he wouldn't be stunned. Throw a fireball, and then kind of hesitate a second to see what he does. A lot of times people will get frustrated and jump, and then dragon punch them, or medium punch if you're still having trouble doing it. Basically, every time you throw a fireball, or you not anti-air someone back, it's a good general rule of thumb to kind of, just for a split second, just kind of hesitate to see what your opponent's reaction is, so you can react accordingly. If you commit to a fireball immediately, you can leave yourself vulnerable. As you can see right there, fireballs have a lot of recovery. If you throw a fireball when someone jumps, you're going to get punished for it. So the objective really isn't to throw as many fireballs as possible. In fact, it's generally a good idea to try to zone someone out, which is what we're doing here, by throwing as little fireballs as possible. And I know that might sound strange, but by doing so, by getting that sweet spot where you can get someone to jump by as little fireballs as possible, you're less likely to get punished. Now, it depends on your opponent, like all things in fighting games. Some opponents might be more likely to jump than others. They might be impatient, in which case you might not have to throw a fireball at all. Just let them jump and hit them. Where some players might be very patient. They might be committed to their ground game, in which case you might just have to keep fireballing them relentlessly. It's the type of thing where you have to adapt in the middle of the match. And I use the word zoning there. So that's kind of what the element of how you control space. Like, we have controlling space. Zoning is kind of about, like, for example, you're zoning him with fireballs. So basically, your element of controlling space is by zoning him with fireballs. Zoning is kind of like the action of controlling space. It's like how you're doing it. So these are basically the general tools I want you to use when you start playing real people. So get this combo down. It'll be like your basic, what some people refer to as your bread and butter combo. Get in a habit of throwing a fireball, waiting, seeing what your opponent does, anti-air them with either of these things you feel comfortable with, either medium punch or medium dragon punch. Get in a habit of pressuring your opponent. Do this on their wake up. And if they start dragon punching, just block. Again, it's all based on what your opponent does. You have to get a read for your opponent. If sometimes you'll play an opponent who will just dragon punch on wake up every time. And you just have to realize, like, okay, I have to just let him do that. Let him do it. And then just make sure every time you block that dragon punch, you hit him with this. You want to get in a habit of every time the other player makes a mistake, you land this combo. It's not the best combo, but for now it's a good starting point. Because as you will find, it is much harder to do your combo in a real match. That's why I don't want to overwhelm you right now. I want to start you with something simple, something you can digest and actually apply in a real match. If you try to do something like this, like right off the start, like that link, you might screw it up. People get nervous in real matches, even online play. People do. It happens. So, when you do eventually play someone, a real player, play online ranked, don't even worry about whether or not you win or lose. That's not what you should focus on. Again, that might sound strange, but you should not even think about winning right now. It should just be about applying the things you've learned. In fact, if you play someone, like let's say you play like a Delsim player, and they're doing all these fancy things that you don't understand, like he's teleporting, he's flying, don't even worry about it. If he beats you, whatever. And it might be tempting to think, okay, I have to go training mode, I have to go online, learn all these Delsim tricks so that doesn't happen to me again. I'm actually suggesting you not do that. Again, might sound strange, but there's a reason why. Because by learning those specific things, you're going to get sidetracked. And those specific, what's called matchup things, they will come in time. As you play more Dalsims, you will learn their tricks as you see them more and more. You'll learn how to defend against them. So don't get too caught up in that right now. The matchups and how to place against certain characters, that will come in time, and we'll get to that later. And in fact, if you beat someone right now with what you've learned, it's probably more of, it's not to say that your training is useless, but if you beat someone right now, it's probably more that that person just isn't very good either, which again is fine. But again, you have to keep that in mind that you're playing with very limited tools for a reason right now. And if you beat someone, it's because they don't know how to counter it. which is fine, but keep that in mind. Don't get, don't get focused on winning yet. So I believe that will be the end of this video. We're clocking at 40 minutes now. The next videos probably won't be as long as this, but again, a lot to cover for this basic fundamental layer, this groundwork. So start in training mode, cover all the basics that were covered here, go into matches, try to apply everything that you've been shown, and keep doing rank mode until you feel that you can do these consistently in real match. Once you can do these things consistently in real match, you will be ready for the next step.